So today we are going to do an overview of all 7 volumes of Thief of Thieves, written by multiple different authors. Now, usually for an Image Comics, this is published by Image Comics. Usually for an Image comic, like say Wicked and the Divine, it's all written by the same author. You can have different artists, sure. They had Matt Wilson, Jimmy McKelvey, and they had some guest artists like Layla Del Luca. They had Matt Lopes. They had like a bunch of different artists, and that's usually what changes. The only thing that will change. It never usually changes the author. But this series does. This series is multiple different artists and authors and artists that do believe it's different artists. And that's kind of weird because Image Comics is like primarily you own, I guess, 2 creators. Like it's Kieran Gillen and Jamie McKelvey. They're Jamie McKelvey being the co-creator of that series. And they can only own the rights to that series. So if it gets adapted to a TV show, they get all the rights, all the royalties, everything. But this one is different because it's multiple different authors. Now, something like with Witchblade, yeah, that was different authors too. That was because Witchblade has been around since like the early 90s. So obviously Warren Ellis, I believe, originally wrote the series. I could be wrong. I know for like Darkness, originally Garth Ennis wrote it. So technically you could make the argument he created the character too. But those both around since the 90s. But this is, let's see the credits here. So Robert Kirkman is credited for the story for Volume 1, but Nick Spencer is the writer. So, I don't know. Here's the artwork for Volume 1. And Volume 1 collects 1 through 7. And this I got used like new because I couldn't get because it wasn't available for new on Amazon. I think I had to, it was like it was out of stock, but they're just coming back into stock. So yeah, you get it, but it'd be like a month's worth of waiting. And there's just a few blemishes here that honestly this should be used very good, especially here. But it's like hardly noticeable. Now I have read the first issue, and you can actually get the first issue, especially here. You can get the first issue of this series for free on Kindle and Comixology, which is another thing I really, really love about Image. Image is really considerate. They're like, it's not every, considerate, at the base, so that sounds very awkward. But not every issue 1 is free for Image. Usually they don't like to they get cold feet if it's like a 6-issue series. They have a 4-issue series too. They have done it in the past, they've done for a 4-issue series, issue 1 was free. So you have like 3 issues to get. I think one is actually 3 issues and issue 1 was free, so the rest was like $4. And you have the whole series there. And that was 1975 by Joe Casey. It's in Roman numerals, but I say 1975. But this series, I believe it's 1975. But Thief of Thieves. So yeah, it's like who actually created this series? And I would say Robert Kirkman. If I had to like, it was at gunpoint, and I had to say who it was. James Asmus is the writer for Volume 2. So I have read the first issue of this series, and I did like it enough. Now, with almost every volume being written by a different author, it's kind of nice because if you don't like Nick Spencer, well, you'll deal with him for 1 volume. Now, James Asmus and Andy Diggle and Robert Kirkman are all credited for the story for Volume 3, but Andy Diggle is a writer of Volume 3. And it's also, I believe, it's 40 issues total? 43. 43 issues total across 7 volumes. The most 1 volume collects is first volume collects 7 issues. Saying here's just the same. I just seen here in the back. Just noticed this. Just wanted to see this little advertisement at the back. Okay. Volume 4 is Andy Diggle. So Andy Diggle, I think, writes the most amount of issues of this series. Now, another possibility is that it was a multiple creator-owned series. Like, everything, if you wanted to write Thief of Thieves, you could. It's kind of one of those things where it's like not locked behind this one author. And of course, they can have guest authors and artists for a series. It's usually like, guest, emphasis on the term guest artist or guest author. Now, Volume 5 is Andy Diggle, written by Andy Diggle. And this is an older series, and for the longest time, Volume 5 was out of print. It was really weird. It was like consistently Volume 5 was out of print. For the longest time, for the longest time, I didn't get this. And then Volume 6, yet again, Andy Diggle. So Andy Diggle writes the majority of the series, and I really like his writing. So it's good that out of all the authors here, my favorite is Andy Diggle. Probably, I mean, they're all good authors. Now, Volume 7, Closure, is the worst rated volume of this series. And I imagine it's because it probably doesn't end the way they want it to end. It's written by Brett Lewis. Now, it seems like the artist is consistent. It's Sean Martinborough. It seems like, in the colorist, I think, too. They're all consistent. Androna Lucas is the colorist. So far, it's consistent with the artist. So, I guess you could say, oh, well, who writes the most amount of issues? Well, that would be Andy Diggle. So, does Andy Diggle create it? No, because you always go by what the who issue 1, the writer was for issue 1. So, that's kind of funny. Like, and I think what would happen is Felix Serrano is the colorist for Volume 3. I think what they would do is they would have, like, if a series ever gets turned into a series, like a TV series or even a movie, all those writers and artists would get credited and get royalties and all that shit. But it's kind of understandable. It's kind of strange to me that So yeah, Felix Serrano is the only different colorist. So that is, I'm not gonna go over what each volume collects. We'll be here all day. It's 43 issues total. The most one volume collects is Volume 1 with 7 issues. And I think the least like 5 issues or something or whatever. Maybe it's 6 issues per volume. I believe it's actually 6 issues per volume after Volume 1. But this is a series I do recommend if you like crime comics. It's basically a bank heist guy quits his job. Like, it's like a quote unquote job. He quits and it goes from there. But it did sound very interesting. I liked how issue 1 ended. It was pretty good. Honestly, that's kind of where issue 1 ends. It's him quitting, so it's technically a spoiler, but it's Volume 1, so they call it I Quit. So what are you gonna do at that point? It's a pretty underrated series too. Now I swear on my grandmother's grave that Wolf Den had talked about. He's like, "Oh, my wife's read this series. She really likes it. And I read it too. I really like it." I don't know if it was him. It was one of the original YouTubers I was subscribed to way back in the day for comic YouTubers, and he was one of them. Maybe it was Comic Pop. I don't know. I have to because it was a long time ago. This would have been, if I had gotten this series way back when I first heard about it, this would have been my first Image comic I owned, and now I have like 500 of them. Skip to 5 years later, at least. Well, no, not 5 years, like 6 years, 7 years. At least almost 10, because 2015 I want to say it was. But that is your overview of all 7 volumes of Thief of Thieves, and telling you about like just the strange. Sometimes Image Comics doesn't. It's not all consistent with the authors and artists, which is kind of strange. But that's that.